I would like to say we are there to help you as technology partner who will be looking for long-lasting relationships with you. Thank you very much.
Now, I realized, Mr. Hettiarachchi, in your address, you certainly paid gratitude to your clients, your customers, for the tremendous support they've given you. We did have 2 of the customers air their views. I now have the pleasure of presenting yet another video where we've got 3 more of your clients expressing their views: Swarna Mahal Finance, People's Leasing, and Silinco Development Bank.
The right IT system in your business organization will be the backbone of your future organizational success. Such systems will enable you do your business better, faster and cheaper. Means achieving better results in a shorter time frame and at a lower cost. This is what we all look for. Selection of such IT system or implementation of such IT system will not be just a matter of selecting an IT product, but it's a matter of establishing long-lasting business relationship with your right IT partner organization who will have necessary business knowledge and also the other resources to support you. Primarily the human resources, the people who should have not only IT knowledge but the business knowledge, and people who will understand what business you are in. OpenArc has been strategically developing such human resources through their own school and through their own education systems. And we have been building up people who are committed to deliver results and also people who have right attitudes to give better customer support. Our clients have been benefited from these resources, and this is what our clients say.
Around 1999, we were looking for a software developer. One main reason was that this was a Sri Lankan product. And once we selected and we commenced the agreement towards end 2000. And up to now, we have grown substantial. And we are happy to say that the system has catered to all what we really require to deliver a good service to the customer.
While working with them, we realized that it was actually easy to work with them. They are very flexible. And in case of troubleshooting, minimum time intervention, they are with us. So we are working with them.
just witnessed, OpenArc has come a long way, becoming the market leader with over 70% of market share in merchant banking and finance and leasing software market. It's a great honor for us to be present when OpenArc is celebrating its 15th anniversary. With a firm foundation in Sri Lanka, now the time has come for OpenArc to enter global market. It's a challenge that we all are looking for. From the inception, our chairman, Mr. Dayahettiarachchi, had a vision to go for open architecture and hence the name OpenArc. Currently, we are working on open architectural development tools and platforms as spelled out in our chairman's address. The software development arena has a new buzzword called open source. Some of you might have some idea about open source. Recently, the trend to use open source tools in software development has increased rapidly. So, all of you may have an interest to know the new trends in open source development and to know the benefits of using open source. So, our next distinguished speaker would be the best person who can educate us on this. He is the founder of Lanka Software Foundation, which is a non-profit organization formed with the objective of promoting open source development in Sri Lanka. And also, he has been elected to the board of Open Source Initiative in year 2005 because of his valuable contribution to promote open source. Not only that, he has been involved with open source both at IBM and at Apache for several years. He is one of the co-authors of the WSDL and WSFL specifications and a co-developer of Apache SOAP, WSTK, WSDL Toolkit, WSIF, and WSGF. And also, he is well known as the father of Apache Jakarta BSF. He holds a PhD in computer science from Perth University, and currently he is a member of the Academic Advisory Board of the School of Computing of the University of Colombo and the Faculty of IT of the University of Moratuwa. Please welcome Mr. Sanjeeva Veeravarna, the chairman of WSO2.
It's going to be a tough act to follow after all those dances. But what I'm going to try to do is kind of give you an idea about some of the trends in technology that I see, and also how open source and open standards are playing into that, and what I see as the future in all of these things, basically. So without making much time, let me get started. So before I get started on actually my content, I want to kind of spend a little bit of time speaking very, very briefly on why IT is becoming more and more important for business. I think Daya's done a great job explaining that repeatedly now from the context of financial sector. But in general, basically IT is obviously taking over the business organizations in every form. And what that is doing is essentially the ability for a company to innovate is now pretty much governed by how well their IT systems work. And that's why having IT systems that work effectively, that work efficiently, that are agile, that are easier to compose and update and so forth is absolutely critical for anybody, whether you are in financial services or in any other industry as well. The other realities are that IT is expensive. Of course, in Sri Lanka, people are used to getting software free or software cheap because you go to Unity Plaza and buy it. But that's all illegal, and I think many of us know it, that when you go to Unity Plaza and buy a Microsoft product for 200 rupees or an Oracle product or an IBM product, that's completely illegal. So if you ignore the illegal parts, the real cost of software is very, very expensive. And it's becoming, as IT becomes a more critical part of everybody's infrastructure, the cost of IT becomes an important part of your cost structures as well. And of course, being an important area, it's becoming harder and harder to find really good people. That's why you need to find partners who are going to build the software for you rather than building everything in-house. And in general, with IT, a general trend that's happening is that centralization is bad, distribution is good. So taking away central control, building more structures which are enabling distributed execution makes it easier to make agile systems, basically. Along with that comes complexity, of course. So when IT becomes complicated, then again you have problems, because how do you manage this complicated IT? Now you've got a different beast under your neck. So this is some of the trends that are happening in general in IT and business, and some of the technological evolutions are really trying to address these things. So I'm gonna the stuff in this slide is basically sort of a very broad spectrum of technologies that are evolving today and why and how they fit in. So I'm not going to go through all this because there's too much of material, but I just want to give you a very high-level view. So the biggest trend in the software industry now is this thing called service-oriented architectures. Essentially, that's a way of building systems that you organize so that every component is essentially a service that's offering some functionality to another part of the organization. So this is a very service-oriented architectures is a way of designing systems that more naturally model the organizational structure of a company itself. And that's pretty much the evolution that's happening. Every major vendor is building service-oriented architecture, middleware platforms, solutions, and so forth. And I certainly see that's going to be the way of the future for the next 10, 15 years without any doubt. Business process management is another big hot topic. Everybody's talking about it, how you want to expose business processes so that you can make them more first class, so you can create new processes. So for example, if you're in a bank and you need to create a new product, most of that product is primarily a process change. And if you have good process infrastructure built in, then creating a new process is very fast. Whereas if you have all that driven down to some very low level coding that you have to hire some programmer for 6 months, then your competitor is going to put that product out before you can put it out, and then you lose, basically. There's this new thing called mashups, which is essentially a lightweight process infrastructure. So you can create new processes by allowing people to compose existing services into new processes much easier than if you were doing it with traditional process technologies. Another big trend in the entire software industry is this notion of software as a service. The basic idea is that rather than buying software as a product, you buy it as a service. So for example, electricity you buy as a service, right? You don't buy electricity in boxes and use it. You pay for what you use. So software is coming into that mode as well. And it's not only software, in fact hardware as well. Amazon right now has something called EC2, Electric Compute Cluster. Essentially Amazon EC2 is rent a server. You pay for the number of CPU hours you use, and you pay for the amount of bandwidth you use, basically. They also have something called S3, shared storage, I forget what it stands for, simple storage service. Essentially what it is disk space for rent. You pay 15 US cents per gigabyte per month, right? So essentially you can offer a service online now without having owned a single computer, without having owned a single byte of bandwidth, without having owned a single megabyte of disk space, basically. Just using everything as a rental model. So this is a huge trend because essentially software is becoming something that we all need, and it's a huge expense to manage it on your own. So why not get somebody who's good at building the software to actually run it for you? So I certainly see in the future banking infrastructure becoming something that you buy as a service from somebody, not only as a product. So OpenArc, for example, as a strong service provider, might end up actually offering it as a manufacturer of software, might end up offering it to you as a service. So you just pay a monthly service fee saying, well, okay, we use this much of banking software this month, and you just pay the fee and that's it. You don't run the systems, you don't have IT guys, everything's sort of all online. Along with that, there's the notion of virtualization. Virtualization basically is saying, why do I have to have one computer run only one piece of software? So the basic model is there is now very low-level virtualization technology, which essentially allows you to run multiple operating systems on any piece of hardware simultaneously. So you can now have a single box being used for multiple applications, all running its own complete computer, basically. And that's a huge trend. That's pretty much the hottest trend right now, because every major platform vendor is now investing into that. So IBM's had this kind of technology in their mainframes for a long time. Now it's coming down to essentially desktop systems. So the expectation is that within 5 years, when you run a desktop system, you actually will be running a virtualization system, because what it allows you to do is run Linux and run Windows and run whatever you want, just at a flip of a button. And essentially the overhead that you're incurring now is very, very little to be able to do that. So what that allows is a lot more flexibility in terms of kind of the applications you can run on these systems. Appliances is another big thing. Appliances basically is taking software to another level, where instead of saying software is a service, now I'm going to actually buy it in a box, just bring the box home, plug it into the network, and then browse, point a web browser to it, configure it, and off I go. And that's again a huge trend now, because it's much easier. So for example, if you're buying a firewall, if you buy the ADSL router that most of you have at home is an appliance. Okay, it's really a Linux computer inside. If you look at it, it's actually a little Linux box, which is running a full firewall, full everything, and the only experience you have with it is through a browser, right? And you kind of treat it as a dumb box, but really it's a full computer. You can program it to do anything you want. All of these are being done through primarily enabling integration and composition through standardization, basically. So standardization has become the biggest thing in the software industry, where you try to standardize every little bit of the stack in whatever way possible, so that you can put it back together and replace parts and replace vendors and so forth without any difficulty. And the objective, of course, is technology being a bigger and bigger part of business. You have to make everything cheaper, faster, better. And so the technology trends that we are seeing today are primarily enabling better execution and faster execution at lower cost. So I'm going to talk a little bit about open standards and open source now, and tell you why those are going to be more and more important. So very briefly about open standards. So clearly software is taking over all our lives in every possible way. All data is being saved softly. And the question is, in what format? In under whose control? Now, if you save a document under a Word format, Microsoft Word format, for example, in 50 years, if you want to read that format, will you have the software to read it? Right? And well, you might say, well, 50 years, that's a long time. You don't have to worry about it. Well, look at the land registry as an example, right? Land registry has a book which is written down. In some cases, the records are hundreds of years old, and you can still read it. And if you can't read it, that's a slight problem, because, hey, the guy might have lost the title, and you can't tell the guy because he lost the title, he's lost the land now. Right? The fact that the registry is readable is very, very important. And so, especially for public sector data, government kind of data involving our identity, all of these things cannot be saved in any kind of proprietary format. They must be in an open standard format that the person who's saving the data can depend on for the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, or 200 years. Right? And there's no way you can depend on any one company being around for that long. So the only way you can do that is if you use open standards which are well documented, so that even if this one company that sold you the software were to go away, you can get somebody else to give you the software. Right? So it's a very big problem for governments to make sure that you don't get into any kind of situation where software that doesn't conform to the right level of open standards get deployed. So first of all, what is an open standard? So as you can imagine, if open standards are important, every vendor is going to suddenly start saying, hey, we are an open standards company. And so really the problem is what is important about being open. So there are many different dimensions of openness. So in some cases you might care that the standard was defined in an open process, right? That everybody got a say in it, that all the people who wanted to influence it had the option to influence it. Or in some cases you might say, look, the only thing that matters is there's at least 2 implementations available. So if one guy goes bad, you have another one around. Or in some cases you might say it should be possible that anybody can develop an implementation without intellectual property limitations. So which of these things matter depends on the standard. If what you're talking about is an open document format so that you can actually save data and read it back in, it doesn't really matter whether everybody in the world had the opportunity to define that standard. What matters in that case is, can everybody actually implement the standard? Can everybody read the standard? And in that case, that's good enough for open documents. Right? Now, that may not be the case for, let's say, the fights that are going on about agricultural restrictions in different countries and subsidies. Right? Now, India is fighting that battle heavily because US, for example, has a strong program of subsidizing agricultural development. in the US, which is killing off Indian farming production and other poor countries. Now that's kind of a standard development process that you have to have everybody participate. There the openness of the process is very important. So it depends on what the standard is about, what kind of thing matters for open standards. So very, very briefly, I'm not gonna spend much time on this. Intellectual property is a huge issue in open standards. So intellectual property renders itself in software in three concepts: copyright, patents, and licenses. First of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I'll only give you a very high-level explanation of this. Copyright, basically, when you create something, you automatically own copyright. That's yours. That's what copyright means. It's your intellectual right, and you own it, and you have the right to grant a license to somebody. A patent is basically a legal recognition of something that you have created, not something that's copyrighted. A process, typically, a way of doing something is what you get a patent for. You don't have to patent something you write. If you write a poem, that's yours. You don't have to patent it. You don't have to license it. Your copyright is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. The copyright holder can grant a license to something to somebody else. Yeah, and so if I own the copyright on some technology, I can grant a license to somebody else. Okay, so now what's this got to do with software? Well, if software is implementing a standard, and if the standard uses patents that are owned by a company, then that means if I want to implement that standard, I need a license from that patent holder in order to implement it. Okay, so you have to be very careful. So document formats. Recently, there's been a big battle about there are two competing document formats called Open Document Format, which is an open consortium format, and Microsoft has one called OpenXML. And there's been a big battle because OpenXML has some intellectual property which is owned by Microsoft, and that means everybody cannot implement it. ODF doesn't have that problem, and so I'm simplifying that particular problem. But there are scenarios where intellectual property plays a major role in how standards get defined. So because standards are important now, because open standards are absolutely critical, every software vendor now positions themselves as an open standards vendor. Right? That's of course, it's like when object orientation became important, everybody said, well, we're an object oriented company. Now same thing's